NASA plans to launch its Artemis rocket to the moon after several delays due to technical problems. It comes after China announced it discovered a new lunar mineral. Arthur Herman is a senior fellow with the Hudson Institute. Arthur, welcome back to the program.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Should the U.S. be concerned about this latest discovery?
Well, concerned in the sense that if these reports are true, and if it is the fact that China has, in fact, discovered significant deposits of a mineral which is supposed to be and is assumed to be very helpful to developing nuclear fusion power. In other words, of using and developing the same kind of nuclear fusion that powers the sun, an almost unlimited source of energy. If it's true that the Chinese have pulled this off, and you always have to be careful with Chinese claims about big discoveries or big inventions and so on. But if they have, then I think it is a worrisome issue, because China has, in the last year or so, begun to lay claim to moon in the way that they did to the South China Sea a decade ago, which is step by step encroaching upon the moon's surface, developing and conditioning people to think of the moon as a Chinese province for exploration, for exploitation of minerals, and so on. And our space program, which got to the moon a number of years ago, needs to really think about what our strategic goals are here vis-a-vis the Chinese.
So Arthur, would you say we're in the middle of a new space race, this time with China?
I think we very much are, and we really have been over the last decade and a half, I would say, ever since China first demonstrated the capability of blowing up satellites using an anti-satellite kill vehicle, which means they could pose a direct threat to our GPS system, for example, to our telecommunications satellites that our military and intelligence services rely on. And in the last decade and a half, well, we've been kind of sitting still and allowing our government institutions to sort of conduct themselves like NASA as business as usual. The Chinese are sprinting ahead. And that's something which has huge implications for our great power competition with China.
So what is China's space strategy? Can you spell that out for us?
Sure. Their space strategy is to make space a domain in which China plays the key role, both as an economic power, in other words, the enormous growth of space as a commercial and economic sector, but also to become the dominant player in space in terms of scientific and technology advances, as well as in the strategic realm, which means basically being able to make China the power that controls access to and use of space for other nations, including the United States. So they have a big strategy. Right now, we don't. And that's going to be one of the big drawbacks that we're going to have if we're going to be able to compete effectively in this new space race.
So the U.S. is spending nearly $50 billion a year on its space programs, much more than China's nearly $10 billion. How is that? Are they just getting a lot more bang for their buck?
I think they are, and also they're making up for lost ground. You have to understand that China's commercial space sector, which is growing by leaps and bounds, is one that is completely fused with and totally subordinate to China's military and intelligence services. So that what happens in terms of space launches, exploration of the moon, for example, China is the first country to land a lunar explorer on the dark side of the moon. We could have done it, but we never saw the point of it. China does. It's part of their overall strategy to leap ahead in these kinds of capabilities. With all of that coherent thrust to what China is doing in space and an overall goal, every mission, every launch plays a part in how China sees itself as the great dominant power in space. And we're just beginning to realize, our federal government officials are beginning to realize that if we don't restart and take seriously what's happening in space and America's enormous capabilities and unleash those capabilities, then China could well achieve its goal, and that is to become the dominant power. The latest report on our science and industrial base, which I talked about in my Wall Street Journal article that ran a week ago, says that if nothing changes, China could well be the dominant power in space by 2032. That should worry everybody.
So let's talk recommendations. I mean, what does the U.S. need to do to strengthen its space program?
Well, one thing it doesn't need is more money, I think, at this point. As I say, the budgets are large. Also, the industrial base that we have. I mean, no other country has the kind of capabilities to launch satellites, to build new satellites, to conduct all kinds of economic activities in space. But what we need to do is to find a way to harness that capability, harness that know-how, that commercial drive and energy to a larger national strategic goal. And right now we have two great agencies. We have Space Force, which is the Department of Defense's focus on space as a strategic domain, set up in 2019. We've got NASA, which has traditionally been the U.S. leader, government's leader in space exploration and in space launches and space sector. But these two institutions, one civilian, one military, need to be brought together as one in terms of not as a single agency, but as two parts of an overarching strategy. That's where we need to go. It's not about money, it's about political will, it's about leadership. And that's the next step that we need to pursue.
All right, Arthur, thanks so much for being on the program.
It's a pleasure. Happy to be here again.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.